We are ready for our main event, and we're lucky enough to have Sarah with us and ready to go.
My name is Sarah Alpha-G. You know, it's that same name on Twitter and on Instagram, all the social media and stuff. I was invited to come talk to you guys about my current practice, and I think more importantly about how I reached the step that I am professionally. So I am an artist for comics and children's publishing primarily right now, and I'm a creative director in video games. I'm, fresh out of school. I'm only 25 years old, and I'm based in Boston, occasionally going back and forth to San Francisco. Like a lot of folks here, I started drawing when I was younger, and perhaps not as young as a lot of folks in this chat. I started drawing around 17. I was only really motivated to learn to draw because I was finding other young artists online, which I assume is a relatable experience for a lot of you guys. I was actually attending psychology. I was a psychology major for the first 2 weeks of my experience in university. I did not plan to go into the arts. And I started doing professional work by the time I was in my third year. I graduated in 2018 from just an average art school that we have here in Boston. So I know the student experience well. I also taught, which I will get into later, and I have a lot of mentees as well now. So I've always felt connected to the experience of being a student, even though I'm out of that formal learning setting now. So just to run through it quickly, because I know I'm going to have some questions about it later, I use a MacBook Pro. I got my Cintiq behind me in my studio. I use the Photoshop Kyle Webster brushes. And for thumbnails and stuff, for some reason, the cheaper the paper, the better, so that I'm not worrying about making a good drawing. I just use whatever nonsense I have around me. When I'm traveling, I use a MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, and an Apple Pencil. I still use Photoshop even when I'm on an iPad because I never made the time to learn anything else. And we can talk about how limited time is an unfortunate reality when you're out of school. If you think it's bad now, it only gets worse. So a little bit about my experience as an illustrator. I've had a lot of fancy pants clients. I've worked for Marvel, for Star Wars. I did a Google Doodle this past year. I have an Avatar: The Last Airbender comic coming up. I've worked with clients like Hank Green, like Scholastic. So it's been a little bit of everything. Yeah. For illustration, I primarily practice with children's books, editorial, young adult publishing. I do covers and stuff. For freelance illustration, it's a lot of character design work. For video games and posters, I've dabbled in a lot. I also, back when comic conventions were a thing, I would go around to San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con. I'm coming up to Thought Bubble actually in the coming year in the UK, which is quite exciting for me. And for art direction, I have experience with short film. I did a lot of art direction for live events and for promotion campaigns. So yeah, got some, experience under my belt. So my two main projects is Squire, which is my graphic novel coming out with HarperCollins. And the other main thing that keeps me busy is my company called One More Multiverse. We are making it as easy as possible to build, share, and make tabletop role-playing games. So Squire is a young adult fantasy graphic novel following my main character, Isa. She goes off to become a knight. It's definitely for people who love Avatar and Mulan and, grew up on anime and manga. I took all of my favorite tropes and I dumped it into this book these past 2 years. And here's an example of what some of those pages look like, to give you an idea of what my comic pages, what my practice looks like. So it's a lot of detail, a lot of action, a lot of research. I traveled to Jordan and Istanbul over the summers, and I would go and pull my references directly. So while everyone was taking selfies in front of the Hagia Sophia, I was taking pictures of the tile work in the corner. So, you have to make the best of your vacations. So these are some other page examples, and you can see more of this stuff on my site. The book is not out for pre-order yet. It should be in July, and it'll be out in February of next year. The other thing that keeps me primarily busy is my company, One More Multiverse. So I am the co-founder and creative director. We have an international team of 20 that includes, a pixel art team, animators, engineers, UI artists, and this is kind of the things we've been up to. We've got, we recently finished raising our Series A, so we got another round of funding. We raised $17.5 million to pull this off. Proper team effort. So I should note, and we will definitely get into this later, I owe everything to Twitter. And I'm not telling you that you should owe your entire career to Twitter, but I also wouldn't even be talking with you guys here if I didn't have an online presence. It was incredibly important to me to get an online audience and start making my connections that way, and realizing like I could create the opportunities I needed for myself. And it's a very, very exciting time right now as an emerging artist, because we have access to Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and TikTok and all of it. But of course, everything had to start with just being a student and just being at school. So I grew up on comics and manga and video games, but as I mentioned earlier, like I didn't actually start drawing myself until I was 17. Where I bought myself a tablet. I highly don't recommend starting with digital tools when you first start drawing. It's like learning to walk with sandbags on your feet. I discovered artists through fan art online. I was really into the show Avatar: The Last Airbender, and at the time I was just like searching up, fan art and images and fan fiction, and realizing like there was this whole world of people who, because they loved something so much, they were willing to create for it. And then realizing through seeing other teenagers do it, that holy crap, like this is a job, which it never clicked in my head before, even though I realize now I was surrounded by art pretty much my whole life. I got into my very first drawing class only in the last year of high school, where I had a very smart, very intelligent art teacher who saw, I guess, like the potential in me, and kind of pushed aside all my nonsense when I said I wanted to go to school for psychology. And she was like, go make a portfolio, go apply to art school, go do this. And I kept saying no. I kept being very, very stubborn about that. But finally, she did crack me. And I was like, fine, I'll do a portfolio. Get off my back, lady. And I knocked it out in like 3 months when I was in high school. And she was super right. I went back the next year and I like formally thanked her for it. This was what my portfolio looked like when I was in high school, heading off to college. When I was creating a lot of these portfolio pieces, it was the first time I've ever worked in a medium. My teacher would tell me, you need a charcoal piece. So I'd be like, shit, okay, sure, whatever you need. And she's like, you need a self-portrait. And I'm like, you're the boss. Sure, fine, whatever. And I just learned to like accept it's okay to not know what you're doing. It's more important to just finish the job. Like I learned that lesson very, very early. So I was quite lucky that I had teachers over my head who cared about me like that in that early stage. So I go off to art. I still think I'm going to do psychology. I take, again, a single art class for fun, and I realize I put way more time into that single class than anything else. I also realize I can't bear to read case studies about people crying. I'm a terrible, terrible material for a psychologist. And the other important thing is that the comic book Ms. Marvel came out. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with Ms. Marvel, but she is the first Muslim like superhero to lead her own title. And when Volume 1 came out, she was also the #1 best-selling Marvel comic. So it was pretty wild for me to see someone who looked like me, who identified like me, who on these comic pages was, had a hijabi best friend and was going to mosques and stuff. And I was like, wait, there's room for these stories? People like this stuff? Are you serious? And it totally like changed my trajectory, where I was like, okay, someone cared enough about this comic to put in the work, to make the effort, to make it accurate. They knew no one could tell that the details on the mosque's walls were correct, but they knew someone would. And that was super inspiring to me. Like the fact that someone put this level of effort. So I marched into my guidance counselor's office. I kicked down the door and I was like, sign me up. I'm going to art school. And then I told my parents 3 weeks later after I made the decision. So, you know, it was good. So with that, so yeah, here's Ms. Marvel. I also, at the same time, I was starting to get like small gigs for art, which also really, really boosted my confidence. On the left-hand side, that is a comic I did for the tiniest little internship. I would do these like little comic strips for them. The thing is, though, is that these comic strips would then go viral. And I was like, wait, people like this stuff. People actually care about this stuff. So it was a lot of like confidence boosting in those early years. I was really, really hungry to learn. I had massive imposter syndrome. I thought I was super late. Everybody around me in those drawing classes was saying, like, I've had sketchbooks since I was 5 years old, and I had only been drawing for maybe a year and a half, 2 years at that point. So I was like, all right, it's time to really take this seriously. My parents don't think this is a real job. I barely know what I'm doing. I just need to like learn as much as I can and prove myself. That it was very scrappy. And I'm definitely the kind of person where it's like I learn best by getting thrown into the deep end. That was my experience when I was building my high school portfolio. It was my experience just, you know, going off to school. And again, I was in that same position as I decided like this was going to be my career. So in that first semester, I was mainly doing a lot of like, you know, life drawing and drawing phases and all that other nonsense they tell you to do in your first year, a lot of that technical practice. So I don't have a lot of work from that time that really felt creative. It's just like, you know, 70 pages of naked people. So yeah, second year of art school, super fired up, ready to prove myself, hungry to learn, and I just throw myself at everything. Everything. It's all experimentation. I want to sign up for animation and film and fine arts, and I take a printmaking class. I find out I suck at printmaking. I do the whole thing. You know, I'm just ready to dive into it. I like get someone to mentor me and take me to my first Comic-Con. I start doing panels and stuff. I do, you know, these animation experiments, these comic experiments. And I thankfully am at an art school where the different disciplines are like, have a really healthy conversation with each other. It's a small building. You're always working next to people who are working like wildly different from you. And I didn't realize at the time, but like now looking back, I'm wildly grateful for that experience. Definitely talk to people outside of your direct major. You will gain so much from them. So at the same time, I also got my internship. I did like a bunch of graphic design and bad infographics and, you know, attempts at illustration for a small media company that I don't even think exists anymore. But it was a lot of just like someone asks you to do something and your only job is to go figure it out. There's like no room to be worried about how you're going to fail because the turnaround was so tight. And again, it's just about like confidence in those early years, like convincing yourself you know how to figure this out. I did panels. I did my first Comic-Con. I was learning like what it was like to talk to other people and like present myself as an artist, something I really wasn't sure how to do. I didn't know if I was allowed to call myself an artist yet. And then these are more like I'm getting better at my technical skills. I'm combining it in a way that, you know, feels interesting to me. I'm like starting to learn what I actually enjoy doing towards the end of my second year. So like this is a piece that I still have this on my site somewhere because like it just works. Like just because it's older work, if it clicks with you in a certain way, you'll be surprised like how often you'll come back to it. So yeah, my third year of art school, hands down, most important year. And it so much happened in that third year. And actually, I guess I should clarify. School here is 4 years, not 3. So I think we have like one more extra than you guys. But so my third year of art school, I learned that I like money. It's nice. I start taking on private commissions. I start selling prints. I learned how to create merchandise. I'm being very, very aware of how other artists I'm seeing online are presenting themselves. And I'm trying to kind of like walk their own examples backwards and figure out how I can do the same thing. I start really properly learning like what I want to say as an artist. I have the technical skills and now I need the concept. So I start doing more experimentation, and now this is more on the conceptual side. I'm signing up for, history classes. I'm signing up for, different disciplines. I'm signing up for science classes. I'm trying to bring in as many of my interests now into my artwork. And I also realize like school isn't going to introduce me to all the things that I enjoy. And there's so many opportunities outside of the classroom. Again, I'm doing more panels. I founded a creative collective called Mipsters, which here in Boston and in New York City, we were throwing these like live shows that were like a TED Talk meets a house party. So we would have someone get on stage and talk about the connection between hip hop and HIV prevention. And then right after them, we'd have a band. And then right after them, we'd have like a city councilor come talk about how friends inspired her to run for Congress. And then we would talk about like, another band and all of this stuff. It was just everything and anything just to see what could stick. And I stayed in that live show sort of scene for a while. Here's an example of like some merchandise stuff that I did. I like sold t-shirts out of my own house for like the first half of my year, made a couple $1,000 off of it. Like I teamed up with my friend who was a screen printer, and that was his whole jam. And we divided the profits between us and just end up throwing all of that money on like Vietnamese food and other stupid things when you're a student. I was doing more Comic Cons, and I was like selling my prints, getting the word out there that I like am this professional artist. I am capable of making money off of it. Here are some examples of like the work that I produced. So on the right-hand side, it was like personal commissions. My #1 clients were people who were like Dungeons and Dragons players and people who did like live action role play stuff. They had so much extra money to throw to like have me draw their characters. Bless these nerds, they paid for my schooling. Fan art was a big one. I started realizing like what people are attracted to versus the work I wanted to make. And I tried to blend the two. Like fan art is an easy way to make money. It's an easy way to get attention for yourself online. Highly recommend it. And the other really important thing is I developed the concept that would later become the book that I sold to HarperCollins, the book that will be out on shelves next year. It started when I was a third year. I took a concept art class, and it was the first time I really properly fell in love with storytelling and realized how difficult it is to do all the drawing it takes for a comic book. So these are very early concepts of what my book would become. So some more concept art. Yeah, same scene. I mentioned I was taking history classes. I was taking, classes from disciplines outside my major. I ended up winning an essay competition. I wrote a 20-page paper about Ms. Marvel and Persepolis, which is another like graphic novel by an Iranian artist. And again, it comes down to like I had really, really fantastic teachers push me in this direction where I was taking things that were like in my interest and they helped me bring it back to my art. So when I won this essay competition and I started getting like recognition for this stuff, it was still directly connected to my art practice. It ended up turning into more panels. It turned into more live shows. I was basically like a student in the day and then like running this creative collective at night. And in the morning, I would run to the post office to ship out t-shirts and prints and things like that, and signing up for conventions on the weekend. Like I was really nonstop in my third year. So this is the second half of my third year. I told you it's pretty big, so I just split it into two. So my first semester, I was doing all that, and in my second semester, I was like really getting restless. I really didn't know if I wanted to be a student anymore. Like I was just so excited and bursting at the seams to just go do all these other things. I went and I actually spent a semester at the other art school in Boston. So I went to Lesley University, College of Art and Design, and then I decided to go see if mass art was any difference. I wasn't really happy with my technical skills. I didn't know if my school was pushing me hard enough. And I was seeing again and again all these professionals online, all these other creators that I was looking up to. And I'm like, I'm not at their level yet. And I'm in my second to last year. Like, how do I make sure that I'm ready to compete with these other folks, that I'm ready to like stand on my own alongside them? So I go to this other art school and, you know, realize, no, the grass is not greener. Every school has their own problems. But that like reinforced this idea that, you know, I am no longer a student. I really have to do this for myself. I'm understanding like illustration as storytelling. I'm really honing in like the power of representation and what I want to say as an artist. And I also realized that I super enjoy working with other creators. I loved my work with live shows, and I'm slowly like practicing my skills to become an art director, even though I didn't realize that's what was happening with me. So examples of that are like this. So yeah, I was at Mass Art. This was kind of the work I was producing there. I was really pushing my technical skills. I was really practicing like sequential storytelling as well. So stuff that would later become like comic work. I did, you know, my first comic, my first foray into it. I made like a 20-page issue for my final. I did a lot of like live drawing and working with models there, which was great. Some more illustration stuff. This, again, it was like a look into how I would start combining my interests in history, my interests in politics, you know, discussion about identity, and then sequential illustration as well. So this isn't like full-on comics, but I'm like taking my baby steps there. And then this was a project that I organized alongside other artists in my school, as well as non-artists in the area. So if you remember, I graduated in 2018. So in this year, this was 2016. Trump had just become president. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of like helplessness kind of feeling, and people wanted to put their energy somewhere. And so I worked alongside some Harvard Medical School students, and we put together our own wall kind of to say like, we're going to do it before Trump does it. And we put this up in Harvard Square. Now, I don't know if you guys know, Boston is home to MIT, to Harvard, and there's like another university every 20 feet in this city. So we just took a bunch of artists and students from all the different universities, and we built this kind of structure. We were almost taken to court for it, because apparently you're supposed to ask for permission before putting a thing in a public space. But, you know, whatever. So it was during this time I was really enjoying working with other creators. I was good at organizing. I really appreciated the process of going from like collaboration to finished product, and realizing like art direction was very, very fulfilling for me, and learning like I wanted to keep doing that. Fourth year, final year of art school. This is, you know, the big portfolio year and all of that stuff. I started teaching illustration at a high school in the mornings, and then I would get on a train for an hour, and then I would go to my own classes in the evenings. I really, really enjoy teaching. It's something I'm definitely going to go back to when I'm done with all my company nonsense. I took my first stab at creating a company with my friends. Like I mentioned, there is a university every 20 feet in Boston. So even though I was in my art school, I would spend a lot of my time with my friends at MIT and at Harvard and at, you know, Northeastern and all these other places. So I not only was my school interdisciplinary, like my whole experience was interdisciplinary. Like in the mornings, I go chill out with film students. In the evenings, I go see my engineer friends at MIT. And on like the weekends, I'm hanging out with PhD candidates at Harvard. Like I'm getting a lot of different input constantly and making a lot of like really interesting connections and opportunities for myself. And I start having a lot more confidence in sharing my identity in my work and learning what I want to say, because I'm getting all of that information coming in and I'm deciding like what to keep and what to put aside. And this is really a skill like you have to hold on to during your practice as an illustrator, like how to take in information and like sift through it. And then most importantly, I do a small Kickstarter, which is, you know, the crowdfunding platform. And I start getting an online audience because I'm like proving to people what my work is in a really concise way. I'm making connections because I have to advertise it. I am throwing myself into this online art community that I had never been a part of before. And because of this, it leads me to getting publishing jobs. I get my agent in my 4th year of art school, and I get a call from the person who would become my editor at HarperCollins, offering me essentially a book deal. I also created an online shop that keeps the creative collective I started sustainable, and I'm effectively a working professional by my 4th year. So this was the Kickstarter I did. I actually still have one of the posters still up on my wall to like remind me of that time. It was a very small Kickstarter, just a few $1,000s, but it's basically achieving what, you know, my portfolio for my senior year was supposed to do. I made pins, I made stickers, I made, you know, these poster pieces. It's just like, it was a test run for myself to see, can I go from concept to full execution, you know, reaching the people I want to talk to. Like this was my just see if I can pull it off sort of project. And as we see, it did reach many people. And to this day, it's still like a top selling item I have whenever I go to conventions. And I actually definitely recommend doing Kickstarters because it is an absolute crash course in everything you need to learn as a freelance illustrator. I had to learn about branding myself. I had to learn about, you know, cold emails and cold connections. I had to learn about how to casually interact with people in like online spaces, how to do a whole curated and very, you know, concise project. I had to like edit my own work. You know, I wasn't answering to the critiques of my classrooms anymore. I wasn't waiting for a client to sign off, like start to finish. I had to say, is this a good idea or not? And really rely on myself. So this is the creative collective that is still running today. I've stepped back from it because I don't have the time anymore with my current company work. They just won the Doris Duke Grant for the Arts, which is a $300,000 prize. And now the work that they're doing is going from like museum to museum. And all of that started because we were putting the money up front through the pins and stickers and prints that I was selling online. This was the first attempt at a startup that me and my friends who were these MIT engineers like wanted to build together. It was going to be a commission platform. So to make it as easy as possible to find and commission illustrators, because not a lot of artists have like those soft people skills or the business skills. And a lot of people who have money and want art don't know how that process goes. Because we plan on having like a creator-focused marketplace as part of that larger idea. So yeah, this is some of the work that I produced in my senior year. I started getting more comfortable, like digging into my own identity as a Jordanian American. I really had to get my confidence in my technical skills before I felt confident in exploring things conceptually. Doing a lot of self-indulgent work. On the right-hand side in the red, that is like my first like client work. I got hired by a video game company called Harmonix. They're the people who do like Rock Band and Guitar Hero and all of that. So like while my peers were still trying to learn how to like print out business cards and stuff like that, I felt kind of very disconnected at the time because I was learning how to send invoice and read agent contracts and all of that stuff. So there was like a real moment where I'm like, am I done here? Am I done being a student? I don't know. These were the some examples of the Star Wars work I did that I got also when I was in my senior year. So like I was getting noticed by publishers, by, you know, art directors while I was still a student, and it didn't matter to them. All they care is, can you hit this deadline? And if the answer is yes, then you keep doing it. This was more of like my own personal work, the kind of work I was developing for myself, really heavily influenced by the like work I was doing with the creative collective, knowing who I wanted to talk to, how I want to tie in my own identity to it. Yeah, and these two pieces, like one of them I still have on my wall. Those were part of like my senior gallery show. These were like my portfolio pieces. So yeah, that's my experience as a student. There's a lot more to illustration than what you're going to get in your classrooms. There's a lot of opportunities out there in the world, and you should really be open-minded to like how you create those opportunities and look for them. And there's just it's so much work. It's so much work. I'm not gonna deny it, but so long as you're not bored during the process, like you'll be surprised how much you can pull off. And there's no right way. And yeah, I got this. And I guess I've blathered for long enough. Let's do some questions.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm just going to...
Thank you.
I can see a few things popping up here. Just first question is from Alana. How do you work with tricky clients?
Yeah. So the number one thing you have to do is actually practice. You have to learn how to spot tricky clients and avoid them at all costs. So your number one job as an illustrator isn't actually to draw. It's to communicate very effectively with the people who've hired you. Like that is actually the number one rule, because no one cares if you can draw really, really well, if you're not delivering the thing they want, or you're not delivering it on time, or you're not giving them a heads up for what you're about to do next. So when I'm dealing with clients, the other thing I want to do is make sure they know how to communicate with me too. So I'm not blamed for any like missteps during the process, because it's not going to be their fault. It's going to be my fault if they don't get what they want. So for me, whenever I talk to a client, the very first thing I want to do is, do you have a budget? Do you have a timeline? What do you want? So once those three things are clear, everything else can be figured out. And if they are giving me trouble in answering those three things, then I don't want to deal with them. That's what makes them to me a tricky client. That seems like a headache I don't want to deal with. Between me and my agent, we have this kind of private joke called the asshole fee. If someone is giving us a lot of trouble and they're really not worth the effort for the amount of money they're giving us, it's 15% more to my fee. So don't be a jerk.
That's brilliant advice. I love that concept of kind of, you know, thinking about the client in that way, and actually that idea of sort of educating a client as well, maybe who's perhaps used to commissioning illustration regularly. That was
where we tried making that first startup idea, the commission platform, is because I was spending so much of my effort educating my client on how to tell me what they want. So I was like, there's got to be a way to automate this.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, definitely. Cool. Okay, I've got a question from Honor. So what are the methods of promotion when using Twitter, or what are your methods of promotion? Sorry.
So I was originally going to have this part of the thing, but I realized that the slideshow was already going to be super long. I'm glad you asked, because there's 7 more slides to this about this exact question. So this is a question that is like, you know, actually need 7 slides to go through it. So things that gave me social media audience. I had my Kickstarter, which was the self-directed project. It gave me a reason to talk to people. It had a very clear thing I can point to and say, look, this is the thing I can do. This is my cool stuff. And that's why I like your portfolios as well. It doesn't have to be a literal Kickstarter, but any project that is very quickly gives people the impression of what you're about. That's why your portfolio should always be like quality over quantity. It's better to say something good and short and quick and strong versus like trying to include every cool thing you've ever done. So the other thing is, when I was on Twitter, I was actually talking to people. I ended up, finding amazing friends and mentors and peers and clients, art directors, all of that, because I would just genuinely talk to people like I would in person, It's just as important to reply to an editor's like call for artists as it is to reply to their picture of their dog, and they're probably gonna appreciate the comment for their dog more. The other thing is I did the work that I enjoyed. I really truly think this is where I'm gonna go more artsy fartsy, but people can tell when you're being passionate. People can tell when you care, and it translates like really, really well. So every time I've gone viral for something, it's because I made something super self-indulgent. I didn't think about, is this what people want? I'm seeing a trend and I want to hop on the trend. It was literally like, this is cool to me and I'm going to share it. So some examples of that. Before I get into the examples. So this is how you turn tweets into jobs. It's not enough to go viral. You have to have follow-up. This is what my Twitter looks like right now. I have my name super clearly stated. My email is always available. Portfolio link. I only show the best work that I want to be hired for. So I want to be hired for comics. I put my comics. I want to be hired for book covers. I put my book covers. I want to be hired for drawing girls with swords. I put the girls with swords, Only the relevant. So, and this is how I share individual work. So if it's client work, I do try to personalize it. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm plugging them, but I also want to be like, hey, I did something for Google, This rule of the horizontal image is still true for computers, but very recently Twitter rolled it back and now you can do like more formats. But in general, horizontal is best for this, for Twitter. I can't speak to Instagram. I don't know shit about stories or reels. I'm starting to learn TikTok, so I can't give super specific advice there. But the point of the matter is like learn what allows your artwork to be the most flattering, no matter what site you're on. Like that's the true knowledge that I'm trying to give you. And always just talk as yourself, talk as a person, feel relatable. And this is how I share personal work. I try not to really talk too much about it. I do try to keep links in the replies. I really want the work to just talk for itself. And I have to be very aware of when I'm posting. If I know the majority of my audience is like based on the East Coast of the US, then I want to post to mornings there. If I'm in the UK, I want to think about like, when are people commuting? When are people checking their phones in the morning or in the evening? When are they, getting bored at work or at school? So you want to time it around those kind of like lulls in other parts of the day. So the other thing is, be yourself, as I mentioned before. Jokes and memes and posting donuts and stuff like that isn't going to give me followers, but it's also going to keep me sane. And it's going to give reasons for other people to interact with me. And that way there's less pressure to be like, I have to post artwork today. I have to post a sketch. I have to do all this stuff, and burning yourself out. Just do whatever you want. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. So social media is a whole other skill set. I really can't stress that enough. And I know a lot of illustrators who don't need it. They don't need it to get work. They don't need it to find an agent or to sell a book. There's different reasons to want to get like social media. For me, it was because I had no idea how to start talking to publishers or editors or ADs, but I knew where they were online. I would follow my favorite artist and I would check to see who represented them, and then I would follow them too. It was like a rabbit hole of like, you just hop from one person to another and find your way around. So it has to come with a goal in mind. So yeah, so that's my little bit about social media.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Sarah. I'm so pleased that you talked about those slides there.
Yeah.
And actually, interestingly, the next question is from Jesse, and it says, "I'd love to have some advice on Instagram promo." But actually, I hope it's sort of fair to say, but I would say that the advice that you've given with regards to the way that you use Twitter could really easily apply to other platforms.
Yeah, I can give you the advice on like, you know, what dimensions work best, or like reels versus stories. Like, I actually don't know that very well. But the same advice is the same. Like, you go and you keep an eye out for people you admire and artists you follow. You see who follows them, interact with them casually. Like, the rules transfer between platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to hear you talk about that kind of that route in terms of finding commissioners through social media as well. A lot of our third years or final year students are kind of looking at building client lists and so on, and that's so helpful to kind of hear that from you.
Yeah, the number one thing I do is actually, I get a lot of emails about this stuff, like how do I find commissions, how do I find clients? And I help them make those posts and show them like what to include and what not to include when they're making those posts. Because I realize that a lot of mistakes with art students is that they curate how they present, you know, commission posts and things like that around what another artist might want to see. Or trying to prove that they are capable of every kind of commission out there. Like, I can draw whatever you need, just hire me for it. When you should really do the opposite. Find one specific, super duper specific thing and just like excel at that. When I was at Comic-Cons, the guy who had lines like all the way around his table and out the door was the guy who's like, I will draw your dad as Batman for $35. He crushed it. He did nothing else at that convention but draw people's dad as Batman with a ballpoint pen.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that.
Specific is good.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Cool. Okay, so there's a question from Georgia. How did you take your interest in tabletop games and turn that into a job?
Yeah. So the story of how I kind of founded my current company, One More Multiverse, is so me and my friends are all on the nerdy spectrum. You know, like some of us like anime, some of us like video games, some of us only read like doorstopper fantasy novels. And so we were like, all right, there's got to be something we can all do together, you know, something fun that can bring all of our nerdy interests. And we decided to try and homebrew our own Dungeons and Dragons game. We're like, there's got to be something here for us, you know? And we thought we were the perfect group of nerds to pull it off. Like, it sounded like we were the demographic. And then nobody wanted to read the handbook because they're like, that's 300 pages. That sounds like work. No, thank you. And, you know, like, yeah. So but of course, because my friends are also MIT engineers and they're very extra, they tried again and they showed up next week. They're like, we're going to do this one more time. And my friend had basically hacked together something that on the surface looked like Pokemon. It looked like a Pokemon pixel art game. And they're like, everyone pull out your phones. We're going to try this one more time. And they basically like made their own virtual tabletop. And we played for 6 hours that day. And we were like, holy shit, there's something here. Hold on. And at the time, me and my friends were trying to like, you know, make this commission creator platform. So we realized we had the end goal, which is, you know, enabling creators to make money off the stuff they love. And we had the beginning, which is 6 friends nerding out in a living room. So like, how do we go from this to this? And because my friends are also like, they were looking for startup ideas, and I'm an illustrator and they're very smart. We ended up going to Y Combinator, which is a startup accelerator in California. And that startup accelerator produced Airbnb, it produced Uber, it did all of this stuff. Like we just packed our bags in late 2019 and early 2020, left to San Francisco, and spent 3 months explaining to like VCs and investors like what the hell video games were. But then even though we were explaining it literally every day, people being like, we have no fucking clue what you're saying. We have no idea what you're saying to us. But then finally we got an intro to the CEO of Twitch, and he was like, I know what you're doing. Come with me. And that kind of got the ball rolling from there. So yeah, it was a wild ride. I showed up to a startup accelerator where 80% of the people there were like engineer bros. And I was like, hello, you know, I didn't go to business school at Yale. I didn't come out of the Harvard Kennedy School. I didn't go to Stanford, but I did a Star Wars. And that worked for me because there was no one else like me at that place. So yeah, it's a cool time. You don't know what's out there until you like go and talk to people. And all of that started because I like showed up to a party, you know, and I noticed someone had like an Overwatch figurine, and I was like, y'all like video games? And that was the start of a beautiful friendship.
Wow, such a good story. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So the next question is from Gabe, and it's, do you have any suggestions for being more confident with your work?
Yeah, you really just have to accept that finished is better than perfect. Like, you'll never achieve perfect. You will never ever create something you are 100% happy with at all times. Like, relieve yourself of that pressure. It's gonna be okay. Like, have fun in the pursuit of a finished piece, not in the pursuit of the perfect piece. You know, enjoy the process of research. Find an aspect of the process that you really enjoy and just hone in on it. Like, your art style is two things. This is what I always say to my students, is that your art style is like what you love and how lazy you are. Because the moment you hit that wall of like, I don't want to do this anymore, you're going to check out. So stop exactly when you want to stop and make that good for you. Like, make that worthwhile of an experience. Like, my art style looks like this because I don't want to render anything, and you can't make me do it. So I just found something that like other people like too, and kept working at it until it all clicked together.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I really like the way you described that, definitely. And I find the just that idea of being honest with yourself about well, you described it as like laziness, but that kind of measure of like how much work you want to do towards something, and kind of gearing the way that the visual language kind of fits.
Yeah, like, your work is gonna be hard. The work's gonna be hard. It's gonna be frustrating. It's gonna suck sometimes. Don't be bored, because you'll push through it all if you're not bored. Yeah,
that's super good advice. So Lizzie's got a question, and it's kind of bringing back to the board game reference. So I'm trying to move into creating inclusive fantasy board and card games. How would you recommend approaching publishers, e.g. pitch packs or concept art?
So where's that question at? So I just understand. Are you trying to pitch concepts to publishers? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it is pitching. So, because like working with board games, I do have some experience working with board games. I've done like illustration work for them. A lot of times it's like they are going to seek out artists, not the other way around. There's very few examples where it goes the other way around. Like, I'm thinking the game Tales of the Loop with Simon Stalenhag. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but like, that is the only instance I can think of where the art informed the game and not the other way around. So it kind of is the same advice I would give to anyone trying to go into any part of the industry, is go find out who those publishers are, find out who their artists are, like follow them, get in touch with them, try to promote yourself like that way. Don't say like, I want to be your concept artist, because oftentimes the most immediate work that they're looking for, the most demanded work, is they have an idea already and they need an illustrator to execute it. So just be a really strong illustrator and present yourself as such, and make it clear like you understand what a board game needs, which is usually like full color art, it's strong character art, it's strong like token art. Like they're not going to need a concept artist. They're just going to need a really good illustrator.
Cool, thanks, Sarah. So there's another question from Gabe. So how did you come about incorporating more of your culture and identity into your work? I think it's really great when artists do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll be very honest with you guys. When I got into art school, part of my imposter syndrome as well was the fact that, like, one, I didn't think I had the skill sets to talk about, like I really, really wanted to prove that I had the drawing skill above everything. I really valued my ability as a technical artist, and I wanted to make sure that no one doubted that skill set. I didn't want people to be like, oh, she just got in because, you know, she's writing this kind of story or that kind of story. I'm like, no, I want to be a damn good artist first and foremost, and everything else will follow. And that unfortunately backfired on me a bit, where once I had my technical skills, like I had to figure out, okay, now how do I set myself apart? And what am I actually interested in? And I felt like when I wasn't including my own like perspective, my own identity, when I was just trying to guess at what other people wanted me to do, I wasn't happy with what I was producing. And the moment I talked very honestly, like I shared things from my background, I was pulling from my love of history, I was pulling from, you know, my favorite tropes, my favorite stories, and like adding my own lens to it, that's what always caught the most fire. That's what people always gravitated to. And I you know, I realized that like I got into art because someone put in the effort to you know, like represent a character who shared my identity. They put a lot of effort into that. And I'm like, well, if I'm denying myself this, no one else is really going to do it for me. Like, I can't say I'm seeking out these stories and then refuse to contribute to it. It felt hypocritical to me. So in a very meandering way to say it, just like be honest with what you want. Like if you want to talk about yourself and your identity, do it. If you don't, super valid. Just find your jam and stick with it. For me, I love fantasy illustration. I love challenging people's perspective when it comes to like protagonists. I love high energy illustrations. And so for me, it felt like a very natural fit altogether.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you, Sarah. So another question from Alana. So what do you do with rushing clients? Like, when will it be done? Or it's been 3 hours since you last messaged about it.
Oh, wow.
This is someone, she's saying she has client issues as we speak.
Oh, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that you're being like micromanaged that way. Yeah, that sounds like a really bad client. I mean, have you tried establishing, like communicating boundaries with them? Do they know when the deadline is? Like, is there a reason why they need such immediate updates? And very frankly, like, be assertive with them, because they will take as much as you will give them. So if you are dancing around telling them no, they're going to think their behavior is okay. So like, if there's a clear deadline and they're only paying you, you know, X amount of money, like they need to know they don't have a right to your time. They have only a right to the final product. And if they need an update at every step, like, then they're not being a client, they're being an editor, you know, and that's not what you signed up for either. Like, I really, really encourage you to just assert your boundaries. Like, that is also your right as a freelancer.
Thanks, Sarah. I completely agree with that. Yeah, it does sound like maybe someone who, again, like going back to the idea that they're maybe not used to commissioning illustration, and
you're not their employee. They're asking for a service.
Yeah,
you know, you are a skilled craftsman and you deserve the time to pull it off. And if they're riding you like that, they need to be paying you more. Like, you better be paid on an hourly basis. Asshole fee. Remember the asshole fee.
Yeah, good call. 15%.
Yeah. Minimum.
Alicia says, if you don't know exactly what you're aiming for yet, do you think it hurts to still share what you're doing on social media, even if it's all over the place at the moment? Do you think this can be detrimental in building an audience?
Absolutely not. No, share whatever you want. It'll be fine. Don't sweat it. Whenever you're ready, you'll be ready. Like, no one is going to be like, nah, we've seen it, we're done. Take your time. It's fine. If you feel like it helps you to share, like you personally, it makes you feel happy, share it. If it's adding pressure on you, don't. But like, it's okay to take your time. Like, the internet's not going anywhere.
Quite a nice way of knowing how all of those different things are received as well, isn't it? Just to kind of put it out there and get a feel for, well, what do people like if I'm doing all of these different things?
Yeah. And you won't know until you see it. Like, I didn't know some of the art for me that like went viral and all of that. I didn't know what would stick with people. I just did what I wanted, and you'll stumble on something. It'll be fine. The thing I talked about, Kickstarter and curate a portfolio, having something to point to, like it just ties back to like, there's no right way to do this. You'll find what makes sense for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Ellie says, please tell us about your cat.
My cat Momo is 10 years old. She's fantastic. She was sleeping next to me on this chair next to me here, but she ran away. Yes, Momo, after the lemur from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, that is. I think I have like a slide of her somewhere. I post a lot about her on social media. It's good bean.
Oh.
That's it.
Thank you. I'm just looking to see if there are any more questions. I'm just scrolling down some lovely comments on here. Just so much enthusiasm. Yeah, so I've just kind of noted down for students, do you think there's value in working from existing intellectual property when developing a portfolio? Or would you recommend for students that they focus on original ideas and content as like the kind of predominant feature in their portfolio?
Fan art is an extremely effective way to, and that's what I'm going to refer to, like working with intellectual property, all that stuff. It's fan art. Yeah. It's an extremely effective way to get fresh eyes on your work and show that you can work with other people's intellectual property, which is, if you have any interest in going into animation, publishing, concept art, all that jazz, that's exactly what you're asking you to do. That's like all they want you to do. So if you want to work for DC, you better be drawing Batman. They're looking for it. If you want to work for the Marvel concept art offices, you better be drawing Iron Man. Like, they need proof that you can pull this off. My Marvel work was because I drew an X-Men. I redesigned an X-Men out of pure spite because I was like, this is boring as hell. I know I can do a better job. And I shared that like out of frustration one day. And they called me up. They're like, we want you to do that, but this time we'll pay you. And I was like, cool. So fan art is effective, but please don't feel pressured to make fan art if that's not what you're interested in. Like, it has to be tied to what your goals are as an illustrator. So if your goals are, I want to work for other people's IPs, nailed it, go for it. If your goals are like, I want to sell, $70 tote bags in luxury boutiques and stuff, there's no need for you to draw, Adventure Time.
Brilliant. That's super helpful. Thank you. Such good advice. And another question here. So when is One More Multiverse going to be available?
It's currently in closed beta. You can play test with us and ask for closed beta access if you join our Discord, discord.gg/multiverse. I'll put it in the chat for you. I am a very regular GM. I run games on there as well. You will see me, come throw questions at me. I also stream for the Multiverse Twitch, and you can see some of our actual play work and our art streams for that on twitch.tv/multiverse.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. So another question. So this is from Wyatt. So, hey, Sarah, I hope this isn't too personal, but what's your journey with ADHD been like? And with how it fits in with your creative practice. This has been super motivating. Thank you. Bumping up my question. There we go.
Yeah. So for me, I was not formally diagnosed with ADHD until like halfway through college. And honestly, this is a very common experience, particularly with women. The symptoms of ADHD are not perceived as quickly with women as they are with men, or I guess like femmes and, you know, more male presenting people, to be more inclusive about it. So with me, I knew that my siblings had ADHD and I knew how they struggled with stuff. And I also realized like a lot of my experience were the exact same as them. So I was like, hold on, you're telling me not everyone fights against their brain all the time? Like, I just accepted that I was always tricking myself into being productive. Like I learned tools of how to deal with my ADHD, not realizing that that's what was happening. A big part of managing ADHD with you know, a creative practice, professional practice, is just accepting how you actually get work done and recognizing when you're most productive, when you can get in the flow of things. And honestly, I think this advice goes to people even without ADHD, like just being very self-aware of how you work best and not being guilty about that. If you only are productive 3 hours in the morning between 7 and 12, accept it, figure it out. You know, don't beat yourself up about that process. For me, like I can only do creative work in mornings. I can't do long meetings and stuff like that. I really struggle with, you know, processing in like a lot of dense information written down. I have to hear it. I have to engage with it. So like learning about myself was important. Accepting that this is just how I am, letting go of expectations of what a good student looks like, what a good professional looks like. I have a friend who also has ADHD. He literally has a 4-hour workday because anything beyond that is a waste of time for him. There's just no point in pushing himself to work any harder. So you have to be very structured. You have to know your routine, know your schedule, and push yourself to stick with it. Because the worst thing you can do with ADHD is like allow yourself like 1 foot here and 1 foot there, and you're not able to make a decision.
Thanks, Sarah. I know how much our students are going to appreciate you talking about that. And I really like that idea of like recognizing maybe that there's a 4-hour window that when you talked about your friend there, it does make an awful lot of sense to think, well, that could be a really productive time. It's a short time that maybe it's more effective than kind of trying to work an 8-hour day just because that's a convention, you know?
Yeah. And like at the end of the day, especially as illustrators, as creatives, like we're responsible for a final product. It's the reason I really gravitated towards illustration and towards, you know, startups and things like that. I'm responsible for my own time. No one's going to be over my shoulder about how I get it done. It's more important that I just do get it done. And I need that. I could never work in a studio, in an office where like there's a check-in and check-out time. You know, I just work whenever my brain is like ready for it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, it looks like that's the last question.
Yeah, I mean, you guys asked for my time. I'm happy to give it.
Give Sarah one more massive thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Thank you.